The tickets have been punched. The bracket is now released. The 2024 men's NCAA tournament gets underway tomorrow in Dayton, Ohio, with two first four games, two more on Wednesday, and then into the round of 64 on Thursday and Friday. In my estimation, the best 2 days on the sports calendar. And we are live together here on this Monday on the early line. He is Donnie Right Side. I am Ben Stevens. So, DRS, here is the bracket in full. The field of 68 in 2024. We will dive through the bracket in all of the names, the numbers, and the teams that you must know, and what that march through the madness looks like for your favorite school or the team that you have a future wager on. That is the field of 68. The top teams on the one line again. UConn in the East region, the number one overall seed. Connecticut enters the NCAA tournament as the favorites to cut down the nets for a second consecutive season. Houston is the one seed in the South region. Purdue the one seed in the Midwest. And North Carolina takes the fourth and final one seed out in the West region. I'll make a point about that West region that feels very up in the air with Arizona sitting in that second spot.
Yeah, and I actually generally didn't have any arguments here on that one line, because the one thing we can agree on, Ben, you sort of play your way into that one line, and you saw a lot of teams that said, okay, nobody was saying, look, we just won our conference, we definitely should be a one line. Maybe you're taking a look at Iowa State, could have had that argument, we should have slipped in there, and maybe rightfully so, because I love the Big 12. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, conferences in college basketball. But I don't think anybody too had many nitpicks here moving forward. Who should have been the one seed? It should have been UConn here. Who should have been that final number one seed? Probably would have been Carolina, as they still got it anyway. But for me and my money here, I didn't have any arguments here. There was no uproar for me when I saw the top lines there, Ben.
Yeah, I think the one line was pretty sound. It was interesting, though, DRS, after a very chaotic conference championship week in which we saw bid stealer after bid stealer affect the bubble, that even for those teams at the top, as we were handicapping the high major level conference tournament action just a week ago, it was Tennessee in contention out of the SEC tournament for that one line. It was Iowa State ultimately winning the Big 12. And the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee pretty much told us what happened during conference tournament week, outside of those automatic berths being taken away from some of the at-large teams firmly on the bubble, it did not really matter. Iowa State, not even the top two seed in the tournament. They're in the East region with UConn. Now we look at the bids by conference. 8 for the Big 12, highly regarded, DRS, as the best conference around the country in college basketball this year, but also 8 for the SEC. Teams like Tennessee, Auburn, Kentucky, Alabama, Florida, with some pace featured in the NCAA tournament. 6 for the Big 10 and 6 for the Mountain West. Now, let's go to the Mountain West to begin, because 2 of those 6 teams playing in the first 4 in Dayton, Ohio, Boise State and Colorado State, and the selection committee, Donnie, told us the reason that both of those teams out of the Mountain West are playing here, they didn't really look at the Mountain West as a conference as a whole as strong as many of us thought it would be deemed, based on the committee saying the Mountain West buoyed its numbers by their in-conference action, and they punished the 2 teams like Boise State and Colorado State. They actually scheduled the most difficult non-conference slates around the league.
No, you're right about that. Like, it's almost sort of a compliment on the back, and then when you walk by, Ben, they slap you on the back at that point, because you got a lot of teams in what you thought it would be, but everybody was complaining, and rightfully so, most of the telecast. The seeding for the Mountain West doesn't necessarily make some sense. So in one essence, they're saying, boy, you guys had a great league, but we'll put you in, but we don't think you're going to do too many damage, and boy, that road is going to be a lot harder than maybe what it should be. But also, it is the Mountain West. They got a lot of respect with the 6 seeds in. Let's see, improve it now, because sometimes you could take a look as a conference and say, you know what, they put us in here. Now it's time for us to live up to the hype. So maybe, Ben, in the next 2 to 3 years, if they keep up that talent in the Mountain West, they get the benefit of the doubt. They didn't get it this year.
It wasn't a great narrative for the Mountain West in the NCAA tournament and that March success before last year's run by San Diego State, all the way to the national championship game, ultimately falling short against UConn. SDSU in that East region, the top half of that portion of the bracket, alongside UConn and the 8th seed, that's Florida Atlantic. 3 of the 4 teams in the Final Four from a season ago, all in the same portion of the bracket out in the East region. Now we look at where the bubble stands around the NCAA tournament, because the last 4 teams in, as we alluded to, Boise State, Colorado State, Colorado, and Virginia. Colorado, a 2.5-point favorite against Boise State for that first 4 game in Dayton. Virginia, a very slight favorite against Colorado State in the first 4 game as well. Those are the first or the last 4 teams into the tournament. How about the first 4 left out? Oklahoma left out of the NCAA tournament. Seton Hall, Indiana State, and Pittsburgh. Those were the 4 teams kept outside of the field of 68. Of those 4 that you see on your screen, Donnie, which one do you think had the best case that maybe got the biggest snub?
And actually not even on there, to be honest, probably would be St. John's. Yeah. But I do think it's Indiana, because something to be said about being, and forget the net rankings and what everybody says. Just look at the eye test at that point. You look at how many wins they had, and it's a game of sometimes you got to win your regular season and then also your conference championship, and also, Ben, stack along 30 wins here to get into the tournament. The one thing we have to understand is the tournament is not built on, let's put the best 68 teams 1 through 68 in the field. The charming part about it is there's so many other conferences that are going to get that automatic bid, and rightfully so. That's what we love about the conference championships, because you can punch a ticket and be roughly a 500 team and still get the same stuff through. But if I'm just looking at those teams here, I don't mind, but if we're saying guys that left out, Virginia maybe, but the one good thing as well as we talk about it, in college football, Ben, we argue because it's the top 4, the top 6, the top 8, whatever it might be. You leave out 9 or 10, they might have a legitimate chance to win a championship. Look, we're not leaving out teams that we saw in the bubble, like Indiana State. How could you do that? They were supposed to make a run. They were favorites to win the championship, and they didn't get in. That's not the case here. But for fandom, I think they left out a couple teams that we would have loved to have been in there.
I mean, Indiana State, Robbie Avila, of course, who was known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I believe the Sycamores should be into the NCAA tournament. They were one of the first 4 teams on the outside of the bubble. Entering yesterday, DRS, the net rankings that the NCAA produced as their metric that would be the holy grail for deciding the field of 68 of an NCAA tournament, those were introduced for the first time back in 2018. Yeah. Yesterday, entering the selection committee on Selection Sunday, the highest net ranking to be left outside of the field ever was back in 2019. It was Wake Forest, and it was 33rd in the net rankings. We had 2 teams slot inside of that, with Indiana State at 29th in the net and St. John's at 32nd in the net, be left outside of the NCAA tournament field. Now, many bracketologists, we had Mike DeCourcy on our Bracket Central Selection Sunday special last night. He got 67 of the 68 teams correct into the NCAA tournament. The only one that he had in that was left out was Oklahoma in favor of Virginia. His biggest issue, DRS, was the seeding discrepancies and how weird the seed surprises were. BYU, an underseeded 6 seed. You had a New Mexico team that the committee claimed only got into the big dance because they won the Mountain West Conference, but after they won the Mountain West Conference, 22nd in the net, they were an 11 seed, the same as Duquesne, who finished as the 6th best team in the A-10, but made a magical run in Brooklyn over the past week. Some of those seed surprises really stood out for everybody evaluating the bracket yesterday and how the committee made those determinations.
And it's also the argument that we put forward a lot, because we don't know where the committee's head is most of the time. And they don't have a week-to-week show like we see in the college football, year, which, again, I don't like that show one bit, but at least it gives you some clarity on what they might be thinking. And then all of a sudden, you put them in the same room for, let's just say, Saturday and Sunday. I don't think they're able to evaluate exactly how big some of those wins and losses are on the fly, which is why you see so many question marks. And also, just to bring up the top of the show, it used to be play as hard as you can, win as many games as you can, schedule as much as you can. Yeah. And then you see the coaches at the end go, well, I don't know why we scheduled so much. We should have just played easier teams, and our net ranking's way higher than this. We're not getting in. So you're always going to have those question marks. So just play the best basketball you can and hope and pray on Sunday that you get a pretty good seed out of it.
The net rankings might need to be fixed, because there have been many issues this year that when you look at conferences who scheduled weaker in the non-conference to build up their net rankings so that by the time you reach league play, your numbers always look good. Is there a benefit for a hard non-conference schedule? The committee might tell you yes, as Iowa State wasn't even consideration for the one line because their non-conference strength of schedule ranks in the 330s out of 362 Division I men's college basketball teams. Now to the odds. The chase for a national championship is on. We preview it next. We're live in person together to start off a new week on a Monday on the early line. He is Donnie Right Side. I am Ben Stevens. And not just any ordinary Monday out of the blue, the Monday following what I consider a national holiday, Selection Sunday, when the 2024 NCAA tournament bracket is unveiled. So we talked about those teams atop the market on the one line: Connecticut, Houston, Purdue, and North Carolina. Now we correlate it to where the odds market stacks up here on the day following the release of the bracket. UConn will enter the the 2024 NCAA Tournament DRS as the favorites to cut down the nets for a second consecutive year. Again, we have not seen a repeat national champion since Florida in 2006 and 07. 4-1 number on the Huskies. It's fluctuated a little bit from that plus 400 price over the last 48 hours, the shortest number we have seen all year. Houston, the second overall 1 seed in the tournament, in that second best price at 6-1. Purdue rounds out the top 3 at 7-1. Before we dive even deeper into the rest of those odds, really in the final 2 months of this college basketball season, Donnie, we saw that emergence of the big 3 in that top tier from the odds perspective. UConn, Houston, then Purdue, the only 3 teams with 3 digits in their price. You can see all at a 7-1 number or shorter. Everybody else at least 15-1 entering the NCAA tournament.
Talking about the same 3 teams for a couple months now on those top lines here. Now, the only thing that's gotten shorter particularly is UConn's odds at a 4-1. Now, good part about this is we're opening this conversation, and Ben pointed out, we're just looking at odds right now. Like, hey, how's that toughest, section going to go, or how's that region going to be? Can a team make a Final Four run? We agree that there is a sharp cutoff between those top 3 teams, UConn, Houston, and Purdue. Now, the interesting part about it is how much do you weigh moving forward? Purdue blew a close game in the Big Ten Conference before they even got to the final here. Okay, we'll see how that weighs out. Houston, maybe the biggest surprise, getting absolutely hammered in the Big 12 final, but against a very good basketball team. And then UConn going like, we've been the best team all year in college basketball. We've been the best team in the Big East, and now we're the best team here all the way through the Big East tournament, and we're the number 1 overall seed. So just looking at that top line, we do agree. They are the 3 best teams in college basketball. But sometimes, what have you done for me lately? What have you seen for me lately? If Houston ends up winning that Big 12, hey now. If Purdue goes through, like, oh, you could trust this basketball team. I love the optics of it right now because there's still a lot of question marks, which means money to be made.
UConn was a 4 seed last year on their way to a national championship run. Last year was exactly what we call this entire tournament madness, because for the first time in the history of the NCAA tournament, since the field expanded in 1985, we did not see a single 1 seed, 2 seed, or 3 seed into the Final Four. But 12 of the last 16 national title winners have been on that 1 line. Interesting distinction as we go even deeper in the odds. Those numbers that you saw on your screen a moment ago, and I'm sure we will flash continuously throughout these 3 hours here on the early line. The top 16 prices to win the NCAA tournament out of the 68 teams in this field, because you have to double the Boilers number to get to Arizona, then add on a buck. It's 15-1 for the Cats, who are $1 in front of the Heels of North Carolina. The interesting distinction there, Donnie, Arizona is the 2 seed in the West region. North Carolina, the top seed in that portion of the bracket on the 1 line.
Yeah, and also, I sent out a tweet that I didn't even know Arizona had lost. Like, I'm watching college basketball all weekend. You just figure because the Pac-12 gets left out a little bit. And then Friday night, I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm watching this. Like, I wonder where Arizona's going to line up. Oh, look at that. They didn't even make their conference final. And to me, it's not to say that, oh, Donnie's not paying attention, but I really didn't put too much emphasis here on the Pac-12 for the entire season. When a lot of people come on the show, be like, love Arizona, sold on Arizona. I'm saying, like, what actually are we watching from Arizona where we're sold on, where now you take a look at more question marks? But again, a better price now at 15-1 because they didn't win their conference and supposedly should be a little bit harder to win out. So I'm looking at the Pac-12 again. I'm not going in that direction. You can have Arizona at 15-1 here. It's just not my style.
So as we have said multiple times, the Ken Palm trends, as we were trying to help you guide through all those national championship markets in the final month of this college basketball season, 20 of the last 21 national champions in the Ken Palm efficiency ratings on offensive ranked in the top 20, on defensive ranked in the top 25, both inside the top 20 offensively and top 25 defensively. Entering this year's tournament, 7 teams qualify. The first 4 that you see in their national championship prices, Connecticut, Houston, Purdue, and Arizona, and then Auburn into the mix as well, Creighton, and Marquette. So we're talking about 7 of the 8 best prices fit the Ken Palm metrics of being in the top 20 and top 25 in offensive and defensive efficiency, respectively. As we continue to group things together, 4 of the 11 best prices are the top 4 seeds in the East region. If Connecticut is going to go back-to-back and make history in the Big Dance, it is not going to be an easy walk through the madness for Dan Hurley's Huskies, because in the East region, Connecticut is the 1 seed. Iowa State is the 2 seed. Illinois is the 3 seed. And the 4 seed is Auburn. That is a gauntlet of a region in this NCAA tournament.
And also keep in mind, like, we take a look at the NBA and try to equate sports, right? Do we think right now, I said, Donnie, I'm going to give you one team that you think is the best in college basketball. Forget about the tournament coming up. I'd say give me UConn all day and night. They have everything you need, including a championship pedigree from running the table last year. But the wonderful part here about March Madness, Ben, 6 straight wins is what you need. It's not best of 3. You tell me right now that Eastern bracket is best of 3. Give me UConn. I'm not even. It's like, it's great plays, it's great players, it's great happenings, but UConn's going to be able to win this. But the fact that UConn now has, as we said, Auburn as a top 4 seed. You take a look at Illinois and also Iowa State. It's almost like this is a mini tournament in itself where you say, if you win this bracket, you should be the favorite to actually cut down the nets because of how tough it's been going forward. And that's how hard it is. And you keep bringing it up. Florida, the last time we saw 15 to 20 years ago going back to back. That's why it's so hard. You need 6 straight wins, not 6 straight series wins at this point.
It is one night where you might be slightly off, and a point could be all of the difference. UConn starts with Stetson. They're a 26.5-point favorite in their round of 64 game. And UConn is the favorite to emerge out of the East region, a plus 110 number. Iowa State down as the 2 seed in the bottom portion of the East region, second best price at 4-1. So from the East region to the West region we go. Again, there was maybe a thought that a team like Iowa State would claim that 4th and final spot on the 1 line. Instead, it goes to the regular season champs in the ACC, who came up just short to NC State in the ACC tournament title game, North Carolina. But they are not the favorites, Donnie, to win the West. That would be Arizona, to win the West region and to get back to Phoenix to appear in a Final Four.
And granted, as I tell you that the Pac-12 is buried to me, I look up and I check the brackets. I'm like, hey, man, if you're looking at teams that are buried, Arizona has a very good bracket here in the West to try to succeed. I also have told you multiple times, the ACC was a 2-team race for me. Now, granted, the 3rd team in North Carolina, the 4th team in North Carolina, NC State ends up winning that championship here and punches their ticket through. But now I look at North Carolina and go, well, they got a pretty good seed here to move forward, a team that I did not want to trust moving forward. But if we're looking in that bracket, for once, we always get angry. Like, man, they do Gonzaga wrong. They do St. Mary's wrong. There's no trust in that WCC. There is no excuses now. If St. Mary's wants to go on a run, they can go on a run because this also breeds off of me, Ben. I don't trust North Carolina, which directly in their path, if St. Mary's can go up against a team like Alabama, slow down that tempo, play a little bit of defense, force Alabama into a game they don't want to play and win that, they line up right next to North Carolina, and I can't wait to watch it play out. Maybe a St. Mary's run here, boys.
I can't believe you're looking at St. Mary's because since the field expanded in 1985, we love those 12-over-5 upsets, and you would think in the West region, Grand Canyon, the champions of the WAC, a 29-win basketball team that has won 78%.
I mean, is that even a school, Ben? Come on now.
Grand Canyon University? Don't talk about the Lopes like that. The 5-12 matchup against St. Mary's, not exactly the easiest opener to the NCAA tournament. How about a potential round of 32 blue blood battle between North Carolina and Michigan State? Yes. The Spartans, a lot of people expected to be playing in Dayton. They were on the 9 line. Michigan State has made the NCAA tournament now 26 consecutive seasons, all under Tom Izzo. Arizona at the bottom of the bracket will go up against Long Beach State, who I'm sure you guys saw throughout the weekend, fired their head coach Dan Munson after a 17-year run at the helm of the program before the Big West tournament got underway. But then LBSU just decided to go on a run, win the Big West, and get in to the NCAA tournament. Now we move over to the Midwest region. It will be defined this season, that is, for Purdue by how they get out of the Midwest. Can they reach the Final Four for the first time since 1980? 43 years, now make it 44 years and counting. The Boilermakers, the 1 seed in the Midwest, the 2 seed in this region is Tennessee. Purdue is favored to get out of the region, but only about $1 difference, DRS, between the Boilers and the Volunteers.
Here's the part with Purdue that's interesting because we saw them get knocked off in the Big Ten championship, but we also told you, Ben and myself, we trust them in the tournament. But trust doesn't mean you're making a run to the Final Four or winning it here. It just means, like, you know what? They're going to win their first round game and their second, as they should. Once you get into the Sweet 16, you can get knocked off by anybody at that point. But if I'm looking at their path here, which usually would have had, hey, Donnie, 2 months ago, Kansas going to be in Purdue's path. Oh, no. I mean, that's just going to be another tough that might be a layup for Purdue, even if Kansas even gets to that matchup at that point. And then if I'm looking at a Sweet 16 matchup or so here, Purdue versus Gonzaga, they should win that. And then maybe they match up against a Tennessee team that got knocked off in the SEC or a Creighton team. This is a very good field here for Purdue to do some damage. And again, trust doesn't mean, oh, look at that. Purdue got knocked out again. No, Purdue gets knocked out in the Sweet 16. It is what it is, but I think they're at least going to get there.
Some double-digit seeds in this portion of the bracket should be names that you know, like Will Wade's McNeese team. The Cowboys won 30 games this year, a 6.5-point dog against Gonzaga. By the way, since the field expanded, the 12-over-5 has happened in 35% of the matchups that we have seen since 1985, going now on 4 decades. We finish quickly with the South region. Houston is the favorite in the South after getting blown out in the Big 12 tournament title. I would expect Kelvin Sampson's Cougs to come out with a vengeance. Nebraska and A&M, the storylines are there. The Huskers looking for their first ever NCAA tournament victory in program history. Duke on a slide, Wisconsin and James Madison. Kentucky will keep the pace. And as we focus on the 2 seed in the South, DRS, the health of Tyler Kolek, the point guard for the Golden Eagles, will be paramount. We'll continue on the early line up next.